In the middle of World War I, the Royal Navy was only technically permitted to build new ships up to the size of a light cruiser. Fisher getting the Courageous class through aside, this meant that in 1916, with a degree of wartime experience already gained and intelligence suggesting that new German cruisers armed with numerous 5.9-inch guns might be under construction, possibly carrying even double-digit number of guns, they looked at the latest C class and realised, well, they only had 5 single 6-inch guns on the centre line. Admittedly, this was a layout that was quite advanced for the time and made possible by oil firing in the ships. Using coal and wing-mounted guns for the most part, even a 10-gun German ship would in theory probably only be able to bring a 6-gun broadside to bear. But that was one more gun than a C-class could, and so a new ship was obviously needed. The D, or Danae class, thus started out as a very slightly lengthened C-class, with a change in layout to accommodate a 6th gun. Whereas the C-class had a gun immediately in front of and behind the bridge, on the new ship the bridge was moved slightly back, closer to the forward funnel, freeing up enough space to mount a 2nd gun forward of it in a super-firing position, which saved a little bit of space overall. 2 more guns would be installed in line with the funnels, and the final pair would be in a staggered super-firing pair aft. Add in a couple of anti-aircraft guns and a machine gun, the slightly longer ship had only lost about half a knot in speed despite using the same power plant. Whilst approved in principle, further minor changes were made during the detail design process. The bridge and the super-firing forward gun were moved a little bit further aft, the bridge became a little bit taller, a little bit more armour was worked in, and the torpedo tubes on each side were upgraded from twin launchers to triples. All of this would eventually lead to a ship displacing 4,850 tons standard, capable of just over 29 knots at full power thanks to 40,000 shaft horsepower driving 2 screws, with armour consisting of a belt 3 inches thick at the maximum, with a 1-inch thick deck and 1-inch plating on the gun shields. Total armament was 6 single 6-inch guns as mentioned, all on the centreline, plus 2 single 3-inch anti-aircraft guns, and 12 torpedoes in 4 triple launchers, 2 per side, plus the Maxim gun for extremely close-range action. A total of 12 ships were ordered in 3 batches: Danae, Dauntless and Dragon in 1916, Delhi, Dunedin and Durban in 1917, and Dispatch, Diomede, Daedalus, Daring, Desperate and Dryad in 1918, although the last 4 would be cancelled at the end of World War I. With the ships being built even as more and more operational experience came in, there were a number of changes that were made as time went on. The first 3 ships, for instance, lacked the knuckle bow, characteristic of most British cruisers thereafter, which helped to improve seakeeping. Other changes would include swapping the 3-inch anti-aircraft guns for 4-inch versions, a very slight increase in beam, the addition of flying-off platforms, and in the latter 2 of the first batch, even a floatplane hangar mounted below the bridge, although that would later be removed. Depth charges would also be added to all ships towards the end of the war. Post-war, the anti-aircraft guns were replaced on all ships by 3 new single 4-inch guns, with a single 40mm pom-pom on either side of the bridge. All 8 ships would see extensive use overseas during the interwar period, first as some of the largest cruisers available in the fleet and thus used as station flagships, and then as the Hawkins and County class heavy cruisers came online, as well as the new turreted 6-inch light cruisers, they became more permanent fixtures in the more distant areas of the British Empire, and some were even transferred to other navies. Dunedin and Diomede went to the Royal New Zealand Navy during this interwar period. When World War II rolled around, as the smallest coherent class of cruisers in the Royal Navy, as some of the C-class had been scrapped, they saw a busy but mostly secondary role, largely patrolling and escorting convoys in the Indian Ocean and South Atlantic away from the major battle zones, and this led to a surprisingly low loss rate. Dunedin being the only direct loss, being torpedoed in the South Atlantic in late 1941 by U-124. There were 3 main exceptions to this. Delhi and Dispatch saw some limited frontline action in the Mediterranean early on, and Dragon was transferred to the Polish Navy at the start of 1943, but then after it was damaged supporting Allied forces liberating France, Danae replaced her, later being renamed Conrad. The final exception to this overall rule was actually Delhi again. In 1941, she was sent to the USA and turned into an anti-aircraft cruiser by replacing her 6-inch guns with a 5-inch 38 suite that the captain of the brand new USS Edison had picked out. Rather aggrieved, the captain had to watch his guns sail away on a British ship, but as a result, Delhi served through the rest of the war supporting various landings in the face of quite significant enemy opposition, coming through each time, although being badly damaged quite often. However, by the latter stages of the war, the Danae class's limited size and the availability of newer ships meant that they weren't considered particularly valuable for the most part, and some were turned into training ships before the war had even ended. A Dragon and Durban were sunk as breakwaters on D-Day, and all of the survivors were sold for scrap within a few years of the war ending.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.